Watching this video, you will read faster than any time in your life. I guarantee you that after watching this video, you will probably double your reading speed. Now, why is your reading speed so important? Arda, you don't need to read books. Instead of books, you can watch a podcast, or you can read the summary of the book, blah, blah, blah. No. John F. Kennedy, president. He's not a nerdy president either. He's a pretty charismatic president. You wouldn't think that he goes to his house and just reads books. And he probably doesn't, because he knew speed reading. He read at about 500 to 800 words per minute. That's about triple to 4 times the ordinary guy. So what that means is, the second they gave Kennedy a file, it was like, read it, done. He knew the file, he read the file, and he could move on. Now what that gives you is an unfair advantage over everybody else. Because if you know how to read, if you know how to read faster, then you will get so much farther. Because even if you say, let's say there's Bob and Alice, and you're Bob, both of you could spend an hour a day reading. But if you read 4 times faster than Alice has to read 4 hours a day just to compete with you, to be on the same echelon. So there are a few principles to speed reading. The first of them is a principle called chunking. The second, reducing subvocalization. And the third is simply being able to see a bit better, which is also chunking. So let's first of all begin with chunking. And before I begin, I'd like to say that these techniques I learned from the legendary Jim Kwik. So just wanted to give credit where it's due. So the first principle, chunking, is, when you were in, say, kindergarten or elementary, when you first were taught how to read, they taught it to you like this. They said, here's A, here's B, B. So if you want to say bread, it's B, R, E, A, D. Bread. So you would letter it one by one, sound out the letters, and understand the word. So when you're reading, you see each letter and the word. But as you got older, as your brain got bigger, as you gained a bit more IQ, now when you read a word, you don't see the individual letters. You see the word. You see bread. You don't say B, R, E, A. No, you see bread immediately. The reason is that's a form of chunking. It's a pretty crappy version of chunking. But one step farther than that is to see groups of words together. So now you see, for example, I'm going to buy bread. And you see I'm going to buy. But instead, a speed reader, what he sees, I'm going to buy bread. He sees those groups of words chunked together. Now, one way you can do this is you get your book and you separate your book into 3 chunks. So 1 chunk here, 1 chunk there, 1 chunk there. So why do you do that? What you're going to be doing as you read this book will be seeing each chunk. So first you read this chunk. Let me get this better angle. First you read this chunk. First you read this chunk. This chunk. This chunk, this chunk, this chunk. This chunk, this chunk, chunk. So you see how the words, this way, you reduce your eye movement. So the reason why you read a bit slowly is that once you're going through that text, you go through one by one. Each time you move from one word to another, you waste maybe 0.2 seconds. But once you put that in aggregate, that's a huge amount of words lost. So instead of doing that, what you will now do is separate your page into 3 thirds. First third, second third, third third. And then you're going to see a chunk. Each of them you will see as a chunk. And you will only move your eye 2 times. So first, when going from chunk 1 to chunk 2, and then chunk 2 to chunk 3. And use your peripheral vision to see the words around that center of each chunk. What this will do is, you'll be chunking the words, so you'll be seeing groups of words, but in addition to that, what you're going to be achieving really is reducing that time it takes for you to see your eye one, word by word. So because you're moving your eye less, your brain can keep up. Your brain is really, really fast. There are these online sites called like Speed Reader. You can just Google like Speed Reader, Sight Reader, blah, blah, blah. And what they do is they flash the words at you. So you never move your eye. And once you do that, you can do a test to see how much you can comprehend. Compare it with how much you can comprehend right now. And you'll see that you perhaps read at double or triple the speed without the same comprehension. And the reason is you just move your eyes less. Your brain is so big, your brain is so smart that it can process all those words. But your eye movements are slowing you down because you've been taught to read word by word, letter by letter. And also, this is, I think it goes without saying, but a lot of people don't do this, you don't need to read those conjoining words. You don't need to read and. You don't need to read all of those. Because it's a waste of time, honestly. Instead of saying, I'm going to get bread and cheese, if you just remove and from that sentence, you'll still understand that I'm buying bread and cheese. But on top of that, now you might be thinking, okay, but what if I'm reading a beautiful literature book? I'm reading The Count of Monte Cristo. I love it so much and I want to enjoy it. Good. What speed reading will give you is the freedom to slow down and speed up as you wish. So if you want to enjoy a text, you can actually slow down and smell the flowers as you go. But if you want to absorb knowledge fast, more, then you can read even faster. Speed read. I want to also go for some exercises that you can use to improve your speed reading. Because again, speed reading will simply make you so much better in all realms of life. Not only will it make you a better reader reading will make you a smarter, more able, more apt person. You're going to be saying something, people are going to say, how does he know that? Another point I like to make is subvocalization. So you might be realizing that when you're reading something, there's a little voice in your head that reads it to you. You're not actually like reading, you're listening to a voice in your head that's translating the text on the page into words, a voice in your head. The reason you do this is because, again, when you are being taught how to read, they said they sound out the letters. They made you sound out the words to check if you were understanding. I mean, there's not really a way for them to improve this because that's the only way you can see if a 5-year-old actually read the text or not. But we're old now. You're older. So what you need to be doing is reducing subvocalization. So how could you do that? There's one technique that I'm going to recommend. The first one is that when you're reading, start counting out loud. So you're reading, and while you're reading, just say out loud, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now saying 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 is maybe like 1% of your brain power. You'll still have about 99 to 90% of your brain on the page. But what it will do is because the speech center of your brain, the part which is directly concerned with saying things, is so focused on sounding out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, it won't be subvocalizing. It won't be imagining the words on that page as sounds. What this will do is skyrocket your reading. Because instead of being limited by the time it takes for you to speak something, so by the way, here's a side note, the average rate for someone who's speaking is about 100 to 150 words per minute. When I'm talking right now, if I go beyond 150 words per minute, it becomes really weird. Max 200, but after that, it's unintelligible. So you're limiting your reading at that when your brain could be absorbing 800 words per minute, easy. So when you stop subvocalizing, when you stop that little voice in your head that reads it to you, you can go much faster. And this counting numbers method really does work. Another thing I'd like to recommend to you is that, also, here's a warning. If you're checking a text for mistakes, let's say you're turning in an essay, do not speed read. The issue of speed reading will get you all the information, but grammatically, things will not make sense. The way your brain checks an essay for errors is by when you read, that sound in your head. If it sounds wrong, if I say, I'm go eat bread, that sounds wrong to you. If I was speed reading that, my brain is only concerned with absorbing the knowledge, the fact that a person is going to get bread. It's not concerned with the grammatic rules. So when you're checking a text, when you're turning in an essay, don't speed read your own writing. Instead, what I recommend for you to do is actually subvocalize. That's the only exception where you do subvocalize. Everything else, don't. Stay away. Here's a technique that I like to also recommend, other than counting, which is to speed, to race with yourself. So you're going to pick out like a trash book, like a book you couldn't care less about. The goal here is not comprehension. Comprehension will come naturally. The goal right now is to increase your reading speed. So you find like a trash book, a book you can care less about. Like just something random text. And every day you do this like 5-minute exercise. You read for 1 minute and you time yourself. And you see how many words in that 1 minute you read. In the second minute, you set your alarm for half that. So I'm sorry if I said 1 minute. You should be like doing 4 minutes on the first one. So you do 4 minutes on your first reading, read normally. Your second alarm is for 3 to 2 minutes. Now your goal is to read the exact amount of text in 3 minutes. And after you do that, after you finish the 3-minute task, you do the same thing, same amount of text, but 2 minutes this time. And each little baby step, you're going to be reading faster and faster. You might lose 5% comprehension. But we're not looking for comprehension. This is a trash book you're doing to practice. The thing is, after a certain while, when you practice speed reading, your brain will get used to not sounding it out in its head. Using your eyes faster, your eyes will pivot from the page to each of those words. And that way you're going to save so much more time. And once those techniques really solidify, comprehension comes naturally. So every day, when you do that 5-minute exercise, you're going to be skyrocketing your reading time. And if I'm going to say anything else as a reading tip, I could also recommend to you Pomodoro method. Everybody knows Pomodoro method. There's like 10 million YouTube videos. Guys, do Pomodoro method. It's better for studying. And it's a bit right in terms of reading. So because in the modern day and age, attention spans are very low, there's a thing called a primacy and recency bias in memory research. So the first thing you see and the last thing you see are remembered much better compared to everything in the middle. So if you separate your reading into 25-minute chunks with 5-minute breaks in between, so 25 minutes, 5 minutes, 25 minutes, 5 minutes, you're going to have much more beginning and end parts. Because sometimes in the middle, you won't be comprehending as much. But once you separate it into chunks of reading, instead of like 4 hours straight of reading, where your productivity is maybe 20% of what it should be, thereby you're wasting most of that time. If you do the Pomodoro method, it will actually work here in this specific use case. Also, here's a really, really unknown tip, really esoteric, posture. Posture is so important. You can read a book like this, all computer neck, just hyped up, like this. Issue 1, your neck will hurt. So did you know that your brain doesn't get tired? Your brain can get bored, but it is impossible for your brain to get tired, basically. Most of the time when you're studying, it's not your brain giving out, but it's actually your muscles. Because our neck muscles are very underdeveloped as a result of the general modern condition, what happens is that as you study, your neck gets so strained that it leads to headaches. It's so tiring for your neck to stay in this concrete position all that time. But if you read with posture, if you read like this, your book held to you in an uptight manner, to up front, you do two things. First of all, you get tired way later. This method might be a bit more comfortable in the first 2 minutes, but after that it's going to hurt. This is going to take active effort to uphold, but you're going to go way more farther. You're going to have way more endurance this way. And second of all, Sitting like this gets you more blood flow to your brain. So the jugular veins here, when you're like this, there's less blood flow. There was actually a really interesting study which said that people who were sitting crooked with their necks, computer neck, actually had a much higher chance of developing Alzheimer's disease. And the researchers said that this could perhaps be linked to the fact that their brain was malnourished. Their brain couldn't clear up the toxins. Their brain couldn't get enough blood supply because this tube of blood, which leads to your neck, is permanently constricted. Instead of supplying blood at 100% capacity, it's going at maybe 70%, 60%, which is not as optimal. So even improving your posture will lead to a way better reading experience. So what we discussed today, I want to do a general recap because primacy, recency bias, what I will say at the beginning and end will be remembered way more. 1. We talked about chunking, how you should see chunks of words as one group. Skip the ands, is, all that stuff. And instead just see it as one chunk. Separating the page into 3 thirds. And moving your eye from 1 third, 2nd third, 3rd third. Next line. 1 third, 2nd third, 3rd third. Instead of going word by word, word by word, word by word. Saving those tiny milliseconds, which really count because in a page there's 200 words. And 0.1 of a second spent moving from one word to another adds up when it's 100 of them. Adds up when it's 100 of them over 300 pages. Which is actually like 30,000 words or something, if I'm doing my calculations right. Second of all, we talked about reducing subvocalization. And we talked about 2 techniques here. The first was counting. So when you were reading the book, you were going to count out loud 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Thereby making your vocal speech part of your brain busy and making your brain stop the internal voice reading to you. Second technique we discussed was racing with yourself. Kind of like in a racing game. In racing games, they usually make you race with your previous lap time. So here what you do is you read for 4 minutes. So let's say in 4 minutes you went from page 1 to page 3. You set another timer for 3 minutes. And you read from page 1 to page 3, where you began to where you stopped, again in 3 minutes. Racing with yourself. And then you do it for 2 minutes. Same time for the same amount of words. And you'll find that your reading speed increases drastically by each iteration. You're progressively overloading reading. And another thing I discussed was Pomodoro method to take advantage of primacy and recency bias, because you remember what I say in the beginning and at the end. So if you have more chunks of studying, you increase your productivity because you're more focused, because your brain took a mental break, and because you remember what's in the beginning and end more. And your posture, because you need more blood flow to your brain, and you need to be able to have that really good, really nice posture to really not get tired while reading. So that's all for this short little lesson. I hope this helps you become a speed reader, because you're going to outdo everybody, all the competition. You're going to annihilate simply because in the same time you do 4 times the work. You need to get a report done. You need to get some research done. You need to learn about a market. You need to read the news. You do it 4 times faster. And 4 times, if I told you that if you paid me $1,000, I'd give it to you as 4,000, that's a huge investment. A 400% return is insane in any market. So when I'm telling you can increase your reading speed 400%, 4 times, that's insane. And it's actually doable, because your reading speed right now is not limited by your mental cognitive abilities, because you're actually really smart. Your brain can get all that knowledge easy. You're limited because your brain is reading to you. You're limited by the ability of your brain to sound something out, to read something to you with its voice, to the maximum natural limit of how fast you can speak until it becomes unintelligible, because you're being limited by your eye moving from word to word. So that's all. Thank you so much for listening to me. I hope this helped you. I'm wishing you all the best. See you, man.